What's going on, Z Community Cuties? It's your boy Azizz Finance, and welcome back to the Personal Finance in Canada show, also known as the PFC show. Whether you've been listening to our podcast for a while now, or this is your first time, be sure that you're either following or subscribe to the pod, and share this with somebody who you think will also get value from this podcast as well. Now, without further ado, let's get this party started and dive into the episode. By listening to the PFC show, the Personal Finance in Canada show with Azizz Finance, you acknowledge and agree that me, Azizz Finance, assume no responsibility for any financial decision or decisions that you make, as it is ultimately your finances and you are the only controller of your own decisions. I am a random person on the internet and not a financial professional, so please consult with one being a financial professional before making any financial-based decision, because anything that you hear on this podcast, overall, each and every single episode, is just a sharing of my experience and are not suggestions whatsoever, regardless of the types of language or words that I use within these episodes. Again, by listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that I assume no responsibility for any decisions that you make regarding your finances. Alright, so I guess you can consider this to be the final segment of our inflation talk, and in today's episode we're actually going to cover the specifics on the Consumer Price Index, also known as the CPI, which you may have heard of, and its relation to inflation. Now, first things first, let's talk about what the CPI is. Now, if you're well versed with investing in stocks, you can look at the CPI, also known as the Consumer Price Index, as the S&P 500, but rather than a compilation of 500 different companies, the CPI actually looks at a few consumer goods and services, tells us the average of those, and then forms a specific price, which either fluctuates up or down, and that is what we know as the CPI. Now keep in mind that the CPI only looks at the perspective of a consumer, so the prices that people like you and I purchase on a regular basis. Thus, it does not look at the other factors such as the cost of manufacturing, cost of goods, so on and so forth, that are more on the business aspect of things rather than the consumer side. Now, by consumer goods and services, we're really just discussing the costs of living, so housing, food, entertainment, transportation, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, now that we kind of have an idea of what the CPI is, what does it actually tell us? Now, again, the CPI is used to measure the average cost of living prices. So essentially, if you see that the CPI increases, chances are that our overall cost of living is increasing as well, and vice versa if you notice that the CPI is decreasing. If we take a look at a simple example of the CPI chart for the United States of America from 2018 to 2022, the CPI went from around 250 to around 280. Now, this is a 12% difference, which means within this time period of 2018 to 2022, there would have been a 12% increase in inflation. It should be no surprise to you that after 9 years of being within the stock market, whether that be stocks, ETFs, options, I've actually managed to create full-time income and being able to retire at any time that I please. Nonetheless, there's actually a way that you can learn how to do this as well, and this is exactly why we offer coaching. We do one-on-one sessions with each of our clients just to kind of get them on the right path so that they could eventually replace their full-time income with the stock market. Not only do we do coaching for that, but we also do coaching when it comes down to making sure that your credit score is optimal, and for other types of topics within the finance world. Budgeting, saving, you name it, we'll take care of it. So whenever you have the chance, and this is something that you could be interested in, check out azizzfinance.ca and check out our resources. AZIZZ finance.ca, and I am more than happy to coach you through the right direction. Anyway, back to the episode. This 12% increase would then equate to an overall increased cost of living of 12%. That means that it's 12% more expensive to actually live our day-to-day lives. Now, the CPI is based on a few components that dictate our cost of living. But to name the top 3 components, this would be housing at 43%, transportation at around 19%, followed by food and beverages at 15%. All of these components have subcomponents, so they're all weighed differently. All you really need to know though is that these components are then averaged out, which give us the price of the CPI. Nonetheless, the CPI kind of looks at the price changes across all these components and then again pulls out that average to find out what our day-to-day cost of living is and its changes. So how does this play into account with inflation? Now, the CPI is often used as a measure of inflation, and to understand how this relates, you need to understand a little quick history lesson. Now, the CPI was made around 1982 or 1984, and it started at a price of $100. Now, this price of $100 is actually used as a benchmark to compare where inflation is currently at and what it's currently telling us at the moment. For instance, if we look at 2022, where we said the CPI was around 280, people can look at this and interpret it as the current inflation level is 180% higher than it used to be back in 1984 or 1982, whenever the CPI was actually a thing. But obviously nobody kind of just looks at this and interprets it that way. So we look at it more on a micro scale. So we just want to compare it on either a year-to-year basis, over the past 5 years, for instance, so on and so forth. So if we're going to be doing that, then it would actually be similar to our example, what we first used near the beginning of the episode. So, looking at a CPI level of 250 in 2021 and then 280 in 2022, we can again interpret it as the current inflation level is 12% higher than it was last year or 2 years ago, whatever the case is or the time frame that you're looking at. Now, 12% is pretty bad because we want this compared CPI level to be close as possible to that 2% to indicate at least a healthy and growing economy. Again, just a high-level overview of the CPI and the actual inflation. So just a high-level overview of the CPI along with its relation to inflation. But again, if you guys do have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'm more than happy to kind of clarify this or even make a new episode to touch up on either one of these a little bit more. Alright, Z community, that's pretty much it for today's episode. Now again, if you did find value from this, be sure that you're either following or subscribed to the podcast so that you're up to date with new episodes that are going to come your way. On top of that, if you feel like either your friend, your parents, your grandma, your grandpa are going to benefit from this episode or this overall pod, be sure you swing it their way, because at the end of the day, it could just be a nice little early Christmas gift or something. But nonetheless, guys, it's your boy Azizz Finance signing out. I'll see you guys on the next one.